entrepreneurs, I've heard from a number of people that they don't really get the difference between mindfulness and meditation. And I'm not sure I did either before we had our guest on today, Andrea Freeman. She separates those two for us very clearly and talks to us about her journey of being more mindful and her soulful centered morning that brings about mindfulness throughout the day for you, that developed her unshakable self-confidence. She even talks about what was her self-confidence like before it was unshakable. On this podcast, there's a lot of talk about focusing on who you're being versus what you're doing. We ask her about her book that's coming out relatively soon in 2022 that is Host Your Life. You're going to enjoy what HOST is an acronym for.
Andrea, thanks for joining the Entrepreneurs United podcast. We look forward to learning a little bit more about you, your past, your current, your future, and what you're doing in terms of your consulting practice and how you're transforming business. Can you first maybe tell our audience a little bit about what your current business is, and then maybe we'll dive a little bit deeper into what you've done before this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So I am right now a mindful business coach and a real estate investor. And the mindful business coaching, what that means is that I work with business owners who are ready to scale, who are ready to stop working so hard in their business and have time for the things that they love and that are really important to them without feeling like their business is consuming all of their life, right? They've experienced some success and they're ready to take things to the next level with a lot more ease and a lot more grace.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that sounds very appealing to me. And if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm listening, man, I've been working so hard on my business. Like, tell me more about that. So before we get there, how did you come to find that? If I understand a little bit more about your background, you were in the events, the catering business, you're in a bunch of different entrepreneurial ventures on your own. How did that transform into, I'm going to help other entrepreneurs learn how to be more mindful of how they're approaching?
Yeah. So, I mean, like so many coaches out there, I was my own first client and I had a business that I was quite honestly working myself into the ground. I, started my own event planning business and grew it to a global brand.
Mm-hmm.
And was spinning on a hamster wheel for multiple years saying, this isn't sustainable, this isn't sustainable, this isn't sustainable,
Yeah.
and yet had no time to think about another way to do it. And finally, I just had to put the brakes on. I just had to stop the action. It was totally not logical. It didn't make sense. It flies in the face of what you would expect someone to do who's built a multi-six-figure brand and has, working all over the world. But I wasn't having time for the things that were really important to me. And I knew that what I wanted to set as an example for my daughter was that she could have anything that she wants in her life. And I didn't want to do it in such a way that it was like at the sacrifice of everything else that matters to her. Like I just got real with myself that sacrificing time with family, not being able to be the mom who goes to gymnastics or can take her to her Girl Scout meeting or those things that she's getting into that are important to her, that it was no longer okay to miss those things. And so I started incorporating, it was amazing as an event planner. I was working with a lot of celebrities, a lot of red carpet celebrities and really high performers, CEOs of major companies. And so I did have a unique perspective behind the scenes of some really high performers. And I started looking around and noticing some really common traits of people who were operating at a really high level. They had really dialed in spiritual practices. They made time first for the people and things that matter most in their life, and work was second on the list, or sometimes even third. It wasn't that whole saying all work and no play, right? Like they were the living embodiment of putting the things that matter first and then the money follows, right?
Yeah.
And I realized that I was kind of running my business from this perspective of like, once I get to that place where I have all the clients that I want and I have the revenue that I want, then I'll be successful and I can take a break.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to flip it. I decided it's time to make time for joy now, not someday when I think is a better time.
Mm. Make time for joy now. Love that. And can you connect that with how a mindfulness practice contributes to that?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, what my journey looked like was really being able to pause the action. And this is the thing that I realized is that I will never do my most elegant thinking when I'm spinning on this hamster wheel. I need to slow it down to be able to have that thought, right? Like there's a reason why so very often when we pause from our work, whether we're, taking a shower to get ready for our day, that brilliant idea pops into our head. Like, why do we have so many good ideas in the shower, right? It's
Yeah.
because we're not overly or hyper focused on the result that we're trying to produce. We're allowing our mind to meander and wander and think of new things in new ways. And so I started to have something really simple, which was what I call my soulful centered morning. And I just started doing a meditation every single morning. I started making time for a like really quick laser focus 5-minute journal practice where I dialed into abundance and gratitude and some of the goals that are, top of mind for me for that day or that cycle, and making sure that I hit on those things every single morning before falling out into my day so that I could enter my day in a really intentional way. And so as I started doing this, it's still in my event planning business. As I started doing this, I started experiencing what I wanted, which was a lot more ease, a lot more alignment, great clients coming my way who are really into and open to this kind of like mindful approach to pulling together their events. I was getting to do work that felt more like a fit for the way I wanted to work. Clients who are far less demanding and not wanting me to be available or needing me to be available 24/7. So it started to feel like a lot better balance. And so I was talking to my colleagues in my industry about how they too could have more ease and it could be a lot more enjoyable and it could feel more like a fit for them. And so people started saying like, why are you not just doing this? Why are you not just coaching people? Because you're always talking about this. And so that was like a couple of years before I finally said, you're right. This is what I'm passionate about. If somebody could pay me to have conversations about this kind of stuff all day long, I would love it. And so when people would say, do you want to be my business coach? I just started saying yes.
The soulful centered morning, I wrote down two pieces of it, and maybe there's more of it. Can you walk through that? You had said you start with a meditation and then you move to kind of 5 minutes of gratitude journaling. Are those the only two pieces of your soulful centered morning?
Yeah, so I do a lot of energy work and a lot of intentions. I do a lot of visualization. So there are different pieces on different days, but my two non negotiables every morning are that I meditate and I do my 5-minute journal. Which actually, if any of your listeners want, they can get it on my website. I have a link to it and I'll give it to you for the show notes and all of that. But yeah, I do those two things every single morning. Now, I'm a big fan of, I don't know if anyone has read or either of you guys have read The Miracle Morning,
Yes.
but yeah, right? So super simple, like really easy to remember, that whole Savers method. And so Hal Elrod in his book talks about doing all of those things before 8 a.m., right? It's the journaling, it's the prayer or meditation, having that silence, doing affirmations. I work with a lot of affirmations, visualizations, all of those things. I'm more of a win the day kind of girl, doing it all before 8 a.m. I got a kid, I got to get to school. I'm like, I don't really want to join the 5 a.m. club. That doesn't feel right for me. So if I can get those practices in throughout my day, then I feel like I'm doing great. I'm hitting all the things that are important to me. So it looks more integrative for me. I'm not trying to get it all done so that then I can go into my day. I'm like, okay, while I'm making my breakfast, maybe I'll put on a little audio book and that's my reading for the day, or I'll listen to a podcast or something like that. Definitely doing something where I feel like I'm learning and expanding my skill set every single day is really important, and it feels right for me. So I try to make sure that I hit that. And the exercise piece, he's got a whole way for you to do the miracle morning in like, I think it's like 7 minutes. You could do each one of those things for a minute. And so I like a lot of those apps where they show you how to do like a quick 7-minute like floor exercise routine, like a quick little yoga thing, or, I'll do that every single day. Longer exercise at some other point in the day, but really get that blood flowing in the morning for a few minutes. That's really important too.
What apps do you use for that, for our listeners who may be wanting to take a note and look up the apps you use?
Oh my gosh, if you just go to App Store, you just Google 7-minute exercise apps. There's so many of them. I don't even remember all of them.
I'm going to try and find the 6-minute one personally.
That sounds like cheating.
Exactly. Well, John optimizes everything he does. So if it's a 7-minute exercise, he'll do it in 6. Question for you, self-identified at the beginning of the conversation as a mindful business coach. And then when you talked about your soulful centered morning, it started with meditation. Can you separate for us what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation, and how do they interplay and not interplay?
Wow, what a good question. And there's so many directions that we could go in with this. So mindfulness is actually like conscious awareness, right? So that is about maybe 5 to 7% of our brain, and the way that we're actually optimizing our thoughts. The majority of what we're doing in our life, our actions, our habits, our behaviors, the results that we're producing as a result, are really coming from that subconscious awareness, right? It's where we have a little feeling like, I'm just feeling like I should do this. I don't even know where it's coming from. I don't know why. That's our subconscious at play. And so when we do meditation, and I do specifically transcendental meditation, that's the one that has worked best for me. Twice a day for the last 6 years and going strong. And I've tried a lot of kinds. So find a kind that works for you. That's what I love. But when you go into that space where you can slow down, where you can stop the overthink, where you can stop the overwhelm, if you're an anxious person, and you can kind of get centered in yourself, you get into a space where you can dial into something kind of big. Like some people call it your higher self, some people call it God, some people call it the divine, whatever feels right for you. You dial into something that's bigger than just like who you are as an individual, and more connected to that kind of cosmic consciousness. And from that place, you become more receptive to those little pings from your intuition and from your gut. And so that's what you then take forward into your day, your life, your business, and you start to be able to make decisions from that place of deep awareness and what feels right to you. You get less caught in overwhelm and overthink. So to break it down, just to answer your question, you have to have conscious thought. That is part of what helps you discern what's right for you. But when you make more space to tap into a higher capacity, talk about optimizing, that's John, that's your thing, right?
Yep.
You're optimizing that other percentage of our brain that most people are using almost without any awareness, right? You start to bring awareness to those blind spots, and you start to be informed from those places. And that's when you start to kind of have a lot more ease. And what I was talking about at the beginning, a lot more grace in your business. You just flow a little more easily.
So you started with mindfulness as conscious awareness. Got that. Meditation is, can you finish that sentence?
Yeah, so meditation is awareness of the collective conscious. It's about connection to what is bigger than you. So, that higher self, that God consciousness, that spiritual realm, that divine, that love, there's so many different things that we identify it as. And it's not about it being a religious practice, but definitely kind of a spiritual space to get into.
So it's awareness of the collective consciousness versus mindfulness being aware of your consciousness.
Yes.
Got it. From what I have heard, and I practice meditation as well, and from what I have heard, the way it's been described is you don't meditate for the benefit of the time during meditation. You meditate for the benefit of the time when you're outside of meditating. Can you speak to, over the last 6 years, you said you've been doing this twice a day, what has meditation done for you during the time outside of meditation? How has it shifted how you present yourself to the world or how the world occurs to you?
Wow. There have been so many shifts. So the first thing that stands out for me is a self-confidence that's unshakable. And in the event industry, it is an industry very driven by optics and a lot of pretty shiny things. And so you can kind of get caught up in delivering that and wanting to be what everyone else wants you to be, right? And this happens to a lot of business owners, not just in that space. What happened to me over the time of meditating, and this actually happened, I would say probably within the first year of my meditation practice, is that I got really clear that I had to be doing my business that in a way that worked for me and really only for me, that my business was meant to serve me. And so I started really slashing services that I had been offering as industry standard, but weren't either profitable or weren't making me happy, and started focusing only on the things that I was deeply passionate about. I shifted from being an event planner who was planning and offering perfect parties to being somebody who was offering events curated by meaningful connection. Huge rebrand, right? Huge shift in focus of my ideal target client and huge shift in focus in what I was offering.
Sure.
So that's just one example. But that kept happening, and my business kept truing up more and more to me, or I kept truing it up to me. And eventually, I had a team, and we were operating, around the globe, like I said. And I finally actually kind of outgrew my business. Now, that could be an uncomfortable place to get to when you've worked for a decade to build something, and then you finally realize, like, there's no space for me anymore. Like, I've outgrown it, right? Like, it's still over here and it's no longer working for me. It's time to create something new. I could have had a huge identity crisis, right? And been like, some people will lay down on the floor, like, what did I do? I messed it all up. I was so excited to give it away. I was so excited. Some of my event planning clients have actually become coaching clients, because they've seen how I scaled this business in a way that really worked for me and didn't sacrifice my life, and are inspired and want to build that into their businesses. And then, I had to take that leap of faith and was able to do it knowing that, honestly, this could get a little woo-woo, because I got a space for balancing that to do with some of that woo. But that I really believe the universe is here to deliver the things that we want.
Sure.
That we do sometimes just have to step out in that faith and take that leap, and then we get caught and we get ushered into the next thing that is meant for us. And so that's what transitioning to coaching full time has looked like. It has been different than any other transition I've made in my life. I'm somebody who in the past has burned her bridges, and I'm out of here, and this isn't for me, you figure it out, and I didn't do it that way. I was able to be transparent with my clients. I was able to bring them along my journey. I was able to share with full honesty and vulnerability with my colleagues about what I was doing at a time where I didn't have all the answers. And I think that opens up space for other people to be able to do that kind of work as well.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Andrea, when you're on the hamster wheel as an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
you're being somewhat mindless. You may be thinking about what you're going to do today, but you're just going through the motions. And there comes a time, and it happened in your business. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into when do you know you're there? Because a lot of times entrepreneurs are experiencing success. Their business is growing, their revenues are growing, their employee count is growing, their headaches are growing. But at what point do you recognize when you're on the hamster wheel? I'm on the hamster wheel. I got to be more mindful and transform myself before I can transform my business. How do you recognize that? What's the aha moment? It sounds like you had that aha moment, but how do typical entrepreneurs see that light that, oh, I'm on the hamster wheel. I need help?
Yeah, great question. So it's different for everyone. Everyone has their own pain point, and some people don't even need a pain point. Some people just get tired of hearing themselves say, this doesn't feel quite right, right? So it can look like, here's the thing. You can look for warning signs. If you're listening to this show, this could be your opportunity to just take a moment to put the pause button, even for a few minutes, and look at where am I fulfilled and where am I not fulfilled by my business, right? And for me, I recognized that my life was very out of balance. I was constantly not feeling like I had time for the things that were most important to me. I am a trained chef. That's what led me into the event planning business. And I don't cook professionally anymore, but I wasn't even having time to cook family dinners, right?
Yeah.
Not even on the weekend. So I was just like, oh my gosh, if I can't have time, right? I created a business because I wanted freedom. That's why most people create a business. They want to do what they love and they want to be the boss, which seems like freedom.
Yep.
If you're feeling like you don't have freedom in your business, something is out of alignment and something is off. And so where are you focusing more on the doing in your business than who you're being in your business? That is always the access to being able to create higher levels of freedom and fulfillment in your work.
Wow, I love that one. And that you answered that question in that one statement that I think needs to be promoted, right? If your business is not giving you freedom, then something is wrong, because the whole point of being an entrepreneur is to have freedom. And I can think of many, many, many times in my businesses where I certainly didn't feel like I had freedom. So that is certainly a connection point for me that would have been a trigger to be like, I don't have freedom. I'm running my business. What's wrong? And I think what you're saying, if I got this correct, is by being more mindful. And the mindful doesn't have to be meditation, I believe. It could be other forms of being mindful. But if you're mindful, whether it be meditating or other practices you implement, it will give you, quote, self-confidence that is unshakable. And when you have self-confidence that's unshakable, I believe what you're saying, that creates a certainty on what you want. And if you do want freedom, then you'll implement measures which could be changing your services, changing your prices, changing your client list, changing people who work for you. You'll change things in your business that will help you drive towards that certainty. Do I have that correct?
100%. Yes. Okay. Thanks for the translation.
I love it. If your business is not giving you freedom, Rich, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, what I heard also is one of the identifiers of if your business is giving you freedom or not is, are you focused on what you're doing or who you are being? Can you expand on that, Andrea?
Yeah. So, I feel like some of us have heard this probably before, but we're human beings, not human doings, right? Yet every day in our businesses, we make up and we fall into to-do lists, but we very rarely have to-be lists. Yet, when you start really focusing on who you are being. And what I mean by that is, am I being someone who creates joy? Am I being someone who causes other people to have what they want? Am I being someone who would inspire me if I heard her story or his story? When you start asking questions like that and looking at how you're showing up, that can shift the actions that you're taking, right? Which is ultimately what drives the results that you're producing. And it's it can be challenged, right? It can be confronting. It can be like, I don't want to look at that. I might not like the answers, right? But it's worth it because what's on the other side is the freedom that we were talking about. It's
Mhm.
the self-expression that so many of us are looking for as business owners, right? It's the access to where our business is missing the mark a little bit and where it could feel completely aligned.
Yep, absolutely. And it kind of, if I take it back full circle, you gave us examples that when you were evaluating, what are high achievers doing? Like, what are these people doing? And what you found was they had the proper alignment of their priorities. They
Hmm.
were mindful of making time for themselves first. Create your freedom first. We had a conversation the other day with somebody who was telling us about the book. It was a financial conversation a little bit, but the conversation was take profits first. Like, have a bank account where you put your profits in there first, and then the rest goes here, and you're taking your profits first. The same can apply to the prioritization of freedom or time. If you're an entrepreneur, carve out your time first, and then what are you going to do with this other stuff? But it seems like a big exercise in mindful prioritization. Is that
100%. Yeah,
correct?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Yes. And this is the thing. This is my approach. So mindful business coaching, that is not completely divorced from systems and tactics and strategies, right? I have had coaches where it's all the mindful stuff. It's all the woo, and I
yep,
feel completely untethered and like I'm out in a space, right? And great practices for getting centered and getting more clarity about who I am and my connection to the spirit and all of that, right? But then what do I do in my business?
yeah,
And then I've had other business coaches that I've worked with there it's all strategy, strategy, strategy. And then I feel like I'm running on the hamster wheel, right? Like it's
yes,
just, I'm only looking at the data and I'm not thinking about how I feel. And it's not integrated and it's not whole. I believe that mind, body, spirit, we should all be completely integrated into our businesses. And so our businesses are really meant to serve us at all of those levels as well. So I'm looking for fulfillment on, and being able to show up as every part of myself in my business, not feeling like I can't really be that part of myself. I got to keep that over there, right? Like that's for my personal life because I want to be able to be who I am everywhere I go. It doesn't mean I have the exact same expression everywhere I go, right? I'm a little different with my friends than I am with my clients, of course, but I'm not a chameleon. I'm not feeling
yeah,
like I got to put on my social media face and I got to show up as a totally different human being than who I really am.
sure,
Mm. John reiterated your statement about unshakable self-confidence, and that was your response to what has meditation done for you. And the first thing he said, unshakable self-confidence. I want to rewind from that unshakable self-confidence for a moment and invite you to share your story to the level of your comfort. Um, for the purpose of our listeners maybe seeing themselves in your story, what
Mm.
was your confidence like before you had unshakable self confidence? What was your self talk? And how did that manifest in ways that weren't serving you?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because from the outside, I don't know if anybody ever would have thought that I wasn't confident, right? I have a really good poker face. But what it looked like for me as a business owner, especially getting started in the events industry, was me kind of looking outside. What is everybody else offering? What do we make available in this business? What are the ways that we sell in this business? Oh, like, oh, everybody's sharing on social media. Oh, we have to get published in magazines. Like, So a lot of looking outside of myself for answers to see what I should be doing versus turning inward and asking myself what felt like a fit for me. So as I went along in the industry, I kept being informed by what everybody else was doing and what was going on in the industry. It took a long time before I really turned inside for like, but that just doesn't feel right to me. I kept trying to fit myself into what I thought the box should look like instead of recognizing that I could design the container, right?
Yep.
So it was a lot of second guessing. It was a lot of forcing and manipulating my desires to conform to what I thought it should look like. Now, I kind of needed to go through that. It's like I don't want to completely discount that experience because the way that it served me was that I did learn a lot about my industry and I did learn a lot about what doesn't work for me. It really doesn't work for me to try to do what everybody else is doing. It really only works for me to do it my own way. So I had to have that uncomfortable experience and eventually arrived to the point where I had the confidence to be able to say, I am no longer available for anything that doesn't feel right. And I'm no longer available for sacrificing my personal life for my professional life. Those were the two things that were just, they became non-negotiable for me.
What's a litmus test that our listeners could use to determine is what they are doing in alignment with who they want to be? And are they more focused on the outside versus the inside? And because listeners that are tracking along with the conversation must be internalizing this at some level, going, where do I sit on this? How can someone evaluate that and do that type of thinking?
Yeah. So for me, what it looks like, it's really interesting because I call myself a mindful business coach, right? But a lot of times when you're making your decisions from the place of your mind, your conscious, like logical mind, you'll feel obviously a lot of brain activity, right? A lot of thoughts, a lot of spinning around and kind of starting to maybe overthink. If you notice that you're going into probably a pretty familiar pattern of like this thought leads to this thought leads to right, like I can't have this because then I'll have to do this, and if I do that people will think that, or if you're worried about what people are think, that's a pretty good litmus test right there. But if you recognize that there is some reason why you tell yourself that the thing that you want is not right for you, you are definitely paying more attention to your mind, to your racing thoughts, which are probably pretty habituated at this point, versus your deep desires. You're not allowing yourself to really feel into your business. So, what I encourage people to do, and this is when we get into really trusting our intuition, is that in that heart space, when you feel more activity there, you know you're moving more in the direction of your soul and your intuition.
Yep. And I think the big thing that you said too was before you had unshakable confidence, I had a really good poker face, which means you weren't being your true self. And you were focused on what you were doing versus who you were being. And I think that's the key point, right? If you're, another way to sum it up, right, is what's the litmus test? The litmus test is if you're not being your true self, there's probably a problem,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
you're not being who you want to be.
Yeah, if you're feeling like, I mean, I checked all the boxes. I had the global business. I had the multi 6 and 7 figures. I had all the outward success that I thought was so important. And yet it still didn't feel like I was getting to be all of myself in my business. And that was what I was craving more than anything else, was to be able to be who I truly am.
Yeah.
And so I think most people, honestly, especially entrepreneurs, go into business to be able to be all of who they are, to share their gifts with the world. I think that everyone has something that they feel called to share on a very deep level. And if it feels like there's something blocking you for some reason, you can't get something, and maybe you don't even know what it is. It could be a blind spot that you're not allowing yourself to fully share that and
Yep.
fully enjoy the benefits of sharing that with people. Then there's probably some sort of disconnect.
Yeah. So you have a book coming out called Host Your Life. And it's hard to not notice that Host Your Life, Host is an acronym for something. Can you save us the suspense of waiting until the book comes out and tell us what H.O.S.T stands for?
Yeah. So, this is actually what was the result of working with all those really high performers. I recognize that they're doing all of these things. So as I was alluding to those key performance traits. So you're hosting your life. And when you are not hosting your life, you're being a guest in your life, just like a guest at a party, right? You're taking
Sure.
what's offered. You don't have a say in the music or who's invited to the party or the food that's being served. But when you're hosting, you are creating something that's authentically yours, that's a reflection of you and what you want to share with the world.
Sure.
And you know that you're being a host when you are honoring your why, that's the H. The O is that you're owning who you truly are. The S is that you're shifting your perspective, because owning who you truly are means getting anything out of the way that is not at the core of your being and what you were really here to do in this world, right? And so there will be things that get in your way, and you have to kind of, not give in to the negative self-talk or the self-doubt or the overthink. And you have to have practices. That's where the meditation, the walking in nature, the spiritual, affirmations, all of that comes in when we're shifting our perspective.
Okay.
And ultimately, when you're doing those things, you end up in a place of deep clarity about who you are, why you do what you do, the way you do it, and why you are so called to share it with the world. And so you get inspired to take action. So T is take inspired action. You're out there not creating the next goal in your business or the next milestone for your life from a place of lack or wanting, or, right, I don't have the clients yet, I don't have the revenue that I'm looking for. That's where a lot of people are creating goals from. But instead, you're taking action from a place of effervescence, from a place of fullness, from a place of generosity.
Yep. I love it. And for somebody who comes from the party planning, event planning perspective to come up with a book called Host Your Life, very appropriate. So honoring your why is the H. O, owning who you are. S, shifting your perspective. T, taking inspired action with your life. Love that. Thanks for sharing that. When's that book coming out?
It's supposed to be out in 2022, so stay tuned.
Okay. All right. Sounds great. Well, I know that's a lot of effort, and you can tell there's a lot of shared stories here. But Rich, when you come up with your book, I think you should have Andrea help you with the titling of it, because I think it's pretty appropriate for for her content.
Yeah, it's powerful and fitting for her. And speaking of the S on shift, I want to shift to the conversation. You clearly are passionate about mindfulness. You're educated and you're passionate, and just the level of energy, and you're almost an endless depth of knowledge and passion on that. And when we started, you had said that you both are a mindful business coach, and then you said a real estate investor. Do you have a similar level of passion for real estate? And if not, why are you doing it? And if you are, where does that come from?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting question, because it's a new development for me. For a very long time, I danced around the idea of being a real estate investor. I bought every book, I read them all, and I never jumped in. And I finally got to a place where I had done enough, I think, personal growth, development, expansion, exploration, and everything that I needed to do to be able to take the leap. And I got a lot of freedom around not micromanaging the universe. And this is what I mean, that I recognize so many business owners have big financial goals and aspirations and dreams. And I want to make this many dollars, and I want to be able to start this kind of foundation or give to these kind of charities, or right, like we recognize those soul goals and the difference and the impact we want to make with our money. But I want my money to come like this, and we're like micromanaging, right? White knuckling. It's got to look like this. I was able to do enough work for my own perspective about how I generate money and wealth that I was able to finally let go of so many generational stories about having to work very hard for money, which always looked like a service-based business to me, right? About how, I could only earn a certain amount, that beyond that, I was being greedy, or I was being, whatever I was telling myself. I worked through all of that, and what opened up for me was the ability to actually take the leap and build a business that I can scale with a team that can run and generate passive income, that allows me to have the freedom to bring in those financial resources to do the things that I believe I'm meant to do with my money. So I hope that clears it up.
Real estate, it sounds like you're newer to real estate investing. Mm-hmm. And you made a decision to explore that and get into it because you opened yourself up to where money came from, and then what you can do with the money to be able to live your best life around freedom. Is that accurate on why you got into it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And how far into it are you?
Yeah, so I'm a few years into it, and I think that what really happened for me, it's interesting that it actually came from all of this podcast guesting that it got opened up, because I started doing a lot of podcast interviews to talk about myself as a coach and get my story out there. I love to have conversations. It's natural. It's marketing that I don't have to think about. And then I decided to start my own show. I was like, oh, okay, I think I'm ready for that, right? And when I started my own show, I started having, other guests who were very high performers. Again, I love to hang out with high performers. And they say your network is your net worth, right? I started hanging out with multi-7 and 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs. And I started recognizing that, like, I was ready to take it to this level, and, like, what are some common threads, and who am I, feeling most lit up around, and who do I feel most myself around? And I was hanging around with some female entrepreneurs who are in the real estate space and really passionate about lifting other women up and bringing them into that space. It's a very male-dominated industry. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to have a mentor and jump into this space. And so that's what I did.
That's awesome. Your network is your net worth. I love that. And I don't want to miss this one. It needs to be repeated. A lot of freedom, not micromanaging the universe. I love that. I love that, right? Because way too many people we see that, see somebody on the road, doing something, and you feel like you got to micromanage that person to make sure they drive properly, but you can't micromanage everybody that drives a car. Like, you got to worry about yourself, control you can control, and again, have that certainty of who you are and what your unshakable components are. So really, really love that. Certainly a lot here. You also host a podcast, or you just guest on podcasts?
I host a podcast. I have a show.
What's that called?
The Up-Leveled Entrepreneur.
The Up-Leveled
Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneur. Love that. Okay. Very great. Well, thank you very much for coming on with this episode with us today. If you had to leave one message based on everything we've talked about today for entrepreneurs that they could kind of click with them one more time on, what you do with your entrepreneurs when you coach them, what would that message be?
So I would say that you should let your personal evolution fuel your business revolution. Allow the personal growth and exploration and expansion that you experience as a human being, because it's in your nature to grow and to develop, to fuel what you're up to in your life and in your business.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
I've got so many quotable quotes. Many of them I haven't heard. The one that we didn't highlight on the podcast was her separating. A lot of people do a to-do list versus a to-be list. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is so profound. Uh, I think I'm going to put some thought into a to-be list. And I'm sure there are some things that are consistent about who I want to be across the board. And then there's some ways of being that may be situational, depending on where I am. Like if you're in a boardroom, you're going to be differently than you are with your family, even if slightly. So I think I want to explore what's my to be list that's kind of absolute. And then what's a nuanced to be list? And is it right for those to be nuanced? Like it just clearly exploded for me a bunch of thought around this focus on who you're being idea.
Yeah, I missed that actual piece, the to-do list versus the to-be list, which connects to, are you focused on what you are doing or are you focused on what you are being?
Yeah.
And, we've always had these long-term legacy thoughts. At your funeral, what are they going to say about you? If you take that back a step and there's a funeral for your business, at the end of your business, there's a big party to celebrate the 20 years or 30 years of your company, and they want to talk about the entrepreneur of that business. What are they going to say about that entrepreneur? And I could tell you personally, Rich, there's been many situations like, well, I don't know. I never really talked to him. He was in his office on the phone and emails all the time. I never really talked to him, And there'd be other businesses where you have more connection to your people and you have, you're focused on who you are being versus what the tasks you are doing. That's another way to relate it to today. And way too often, to your point, it's in life, we talk about bucket lists and to-do lists and honey-do lists around the house. And, it's all lists. It's all to do, what you're going to do. But very infrequently is it what you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
And as you're talking about, a funeral for your business, if I've heard that before, I forgot it. It's a cool twist on it that, gosh, you can almost do a introspection or training session on that alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I think about that and connect that with what she said about, she had said she was focused on fitting into what the box should look like. And she realized she can design the container. I think that's really interesting. When you look at the legacy you're leaving with your business, what legacy is it if the legacy you're leaving is fitting in the box of what everybody else is doing? That's not much of a legacy versus a legacy of really looking on the inside on what is a fit for you and who you want to be and what are you passionate about and joyful about and skilled at, and building a whole business around those things. Like, isn't that the legacy that you'd like to talk about when your funeral for your business comes?
Yeah. It starts with the hamster wheel, though. Like I asked the question because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs just don't know they're on the hamster wheel. Being an entrepreneur is stressful. Being an entrepreneur is tough. You have to be working a lot of hours. You got to be putting a lot of time in. How do you actually know, okay, I got to stop doing that because I'm sacrificing time for my family instead of the business, or I'm not fulfilled, or I'm not being happy with what I'm doing? Yet to grow a business takes a lot of work. Like, don't be an entrepreneur if you're not willing to put the work in. So, I think there's a little bit of a question here. When you first start a business, if you and I were to start a business right now, we would have to be committed, Rich, to this business. Doesn't mean we're not committed to our family or our kids or other priorities, but it takes a big commitment. If you're not prioritizing that business and the success of that business, it may not survive. It may not get there. That's one level. But then you're in the mid business. Your business is somewhat successful. It's making profits, but you're still not where your goals were. You still got to commit a lot to your business. It seems like Andrea got to another level where she'd achieved a lot of the goals she thought. She never thought her business was going to be that popular. But she got to that destination and was like, is this all that's here? And I'm on this hamster wheel and I'm sacrificing time for family. And if I look over here at these other high achievers, here's what they're doing. And there's this connection point. I'm still not 100% clear when that connection point comes in, because you have the startup phase, the mid phase, and then maybe, you attain some of the goals of your business. But when do you sit back as an entrepreneur and say, okay, I got to change this up. I got to be, putting succession in my company, backing out a little bit, focusing on these other areas, because you can't do that when you first start up. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if I were coaching you as an entrepreneur and you asked that, and then tying it back into relative to this particular podcast,
Yeah.
I would say it comes back to the title of her book on hosting your life. The first thing in the H is honor your why.
Mm-hmm.
Well, isn't the step before that is discovering your why?
Sure.
And I'm not sure that you need to wait for a particular time in business to discover your why. I don't know that it's on the entry level, mid level, or large level that is the right time to discover your why, or even before you start your business to discover your why.
Sure.
My opinion would be when you get consciousness of having a why is important, that's when you should explore what your why is, so you can honor your why, own who you truly are, shift your perspective, and take inspired action. So for me, if I were coaching you, I'd say it all comes down to the why. And is this good timing for you? Because if you say it's not good timing, then it's not good timing. Is this good timing for you, that you're ready to explore your why and what your meaning is and the legacy you want to leave, so that we can align your business with it if it's not?
Yeah. And maybe what you're also saying too is that's fine. You got to put a lot of time into your business because you started a business, you have a commitment, you got to see it through. However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be mindful, of what your ultimate why is, how you're going to get there, and continue to reevaluate, which is maybe the shifting your perspective, right? Your why could change. Your perspective on starting a business could change. How much time you're devoting to your business could change. All that stuff could change. And, again, that takes me to another piece, which is it's a very difficult thing for entrepreneurs because, there's the quote of, the tail wagging the dog. Well, a lot of entrepreneurs, the business is wagging them.
Yes.
Right. The business is controlling their life, and trying to be more mindful of how you get out of that is a good reason to have a coach in the first place, because it's very hard for you to not do the tasks at hand that are there and think about that. And, the quote she gave me that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, and I think it would hit a lot of entrepreneurs like a ton of bricks, is if your business is not giving you freedom, then you're probably doing something wrong. Well, Rich, I'll tell you what, man, 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs may go, I don't have quite the freedom I thought I'd have by running a business.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it makes me come back to this idea of part of her message was gaining consciousness and awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned it on a recent podcast. We seem to have this interesting theme of some guests lately around being intentional and being conscious. Mm-hmm. And boy, the mic drop of an ending that she had on that last question that you asked is, let your personal evolution fuel your business revolution. In order to let that happen, it starts with consciousness and really digging in and understanding oneself and what's fulfilling to you and who you want to be, and create that to-be list.